Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today we're taking a look at running with rifles. This is a top-down shooter with sort of RPG elements, and it's created by, I believe, an indie studio by the name of Modulatio Games, and it's an interesting one. It has this sort of graphic novel slash kind of comic book, I guess, art style, and it definitely lends itself to a lot of character. Now, just gonna show you the single player. You can play this in online mode, however, that has its own problems, which I'll get onto later on. There are 3 factions, but so far as I've seen anyway, it is one faction versus another at any given time. So we're gonna play as the Green Belts, which is sort of the American faction. The Grey Collars are sort of the Germans, and the Brown Pants, I believe, are the Russians. Alright, let's get into it. So, there are a bunch of sliders that we can choose from. We can set accuracy as well as capacity of enemies, and these are actually the number of troops that are on the field at any given time. So, having more of each will, of course, affect performance as well as make it easier or harder to play. And, of course, there are experience and resource rewards, but we're just going to get into it and I'll show you what this is all about. Now, first off, I will say that loading times are a little bit long. That, I guess it can't really be helped because the maps themselves are actually quite large. We just open the map menu down here. You can actually see it's a really big map. This is a snow map, so everybody has these little snow hats on. And all of these are AI. They are completely random in terms of rank and, I guess, equipment, actually. They do vary in equipment quite a bit. So we're just going to break into here. We can't actually pick this up, but there is an inventory. So as you can see here, these RP are your resource points. These are what you use to get new equipment. And the RP itself, every item has its own value, so you can actually sell it back to get more things. And of course there is a minimum XP requirement to actually pick things up. Now you can see right here, we're starting as a private with no XP whatsoever. If I load up a previous campaign, we will actually have some there. So the stash is where we can put equipment here if we don't want to lose it. And there's an armory around here somewhere where we can pick up new things. But as you can see, it's a kind of... well, it's kind of a good-looking game, but at the same time it's sort of... it has this art style to it that you can see very clearly, the sort of cel-shaded comic book style. And kind of looking for something to do. There is an objective over there, so we're going to get straight into combat pretty much immediately. That ticking sound that you can hear in the background is actually the objective being captured. So long as we hold the majority, you can see there's a possession meter at the bottom. So long as we hold the majority, we will more than likely win. There's some enemy weapons on the ground that we can choose to pick up if we want. There is a dead enemy right here. He's fading into the ground. There are vehicles. Vehicles seem to control pretty nicely, and you can see the little speech bubbles popping up here and there. There is friendly fire, so you have to be very careful where you're shooting. Now, I will emphasize one thing. You're not a special character by any means. You are just a normal soldier. And there are different stances as well, so we can actually prone on the ground if we want to be more accurate. Trying to shoot at this guy here. You might notice as well as I'm aiming over an enemy, it flashes up in green if we can actually hit them. There are cover mechanics, so you can see sometimes we aren't able to actually hit somebody. So if we duck into cover over here, we will actually be in space. And there are callouts as well. So, if you do see an enemy... I've just been killed. If you do see an enemy, it will be automatically called out, which is quite nice, because stuff can change on the battlefield quite quickly, and you want to have that info out there very, very fast. You do die very quickly. That's what I've noticed. There are medkits, but I've never actually been able to use them, because one thing that I will say is that you don't know how much health you have. At least I've not figured out a way of knowing how much health I have. I've just been killed by a teammate there. There are also very few kill indicators, so getting hit, it's hard to tell where you've been hit from or what you've been killed by sometimes. And it's hard to know how close you are to death. At the same time, shooting an enemy, it's hard to know. You do get some indication when you hit them, because you do see blood come out of them in a very comical sort of way. But aside from them falling over and having a little bit of XP flash up, it's hard to know if you're actually hitting the guy or not, in some cases. Mainly because of how far away the view is. You probably don't want to be going in there. Let's try and throw a grenade. Let's have that bounce a little bit. No. Might be out of my range there. Let's try and pick up this grenade over here. That's an AK. Did I get the grenade? I got the grenade. Okay, so throwing grenades is a matter of sort of aiming at the exact spot you wanted to go, but there is a maximum range, so it's not likely you'll be able to hit everything with it. And of course the enemy, or the AI, does sometimes sort of dodge into grenades. I've just been hit there and I'm killed, but I managed to get the grenade out. You don't actually have any support here. I wonder if our team is just completely lost now. The AI does get lost a little bit sometimes. There are some customization options. Like I noticed this guy here has a different shirt, but don't ask me how he got it, because for the life of me, sometimes I can't figure it out. I will say the game is a little bit unintuitive. There is a bit of a learning curve to it. But despite that, it's actually quite enjoyable, because it's a very simple game to just sort of start playing. And if I just hover over here, we can actually see how much XP we have. So as we sort of rank up, we will unlock more weapons to access and play with. We do lose a little bit of XP as well as RP every time we die. That is, of course, just as a result of having been killed. And of course the RP is to repurchase anything we have. So of course, as you might expect, the more complicated your loadout is, the more likely you are to actually spend RP when getting new equipment. I suppose if you have the default loadout, you probably don't lose very much. Not sure if I can actually hit anything there. Animations are fairly simplistic, although it is a little bit jerky here and there. When you change direction, there isn't actually an animation for changing direction. Like if I run this way and then sort of just shoot, it just snaps that way. But it's not something you really notice all that much, because everything is so far away. And I just got blown up there. But I'm actually wounded, so if I've been knocked down on the ground there, you don't die immediately. And of course there are randomized names, so you can have some funny sounding names sometimes. Which is always quite nice to see. And we can vault over that if we don't, of course, die immediately. And this is really just how the campaign plays out. It goes over a series of different maps once you've completed all of the objectives. Some of the objectives involve capturing different points like we are now. Some of it involves destroying specific objects. Some just involve defending specific points as well. So it does vary from time to time, and it's all very dynamic, mainly because of just, it depends entirely on how your team and the enemy team sort of react to each other, so it's entirely dynamic. I've also seen that even if you fail a particular mission, you can still continue. You don't lose the campaign immediately, it just sort of transitions to a different map and you play again. And sometimes against completely different opposition as well. So it just sort of plays until one side is completely victorious. But there's not much else we can really say about it. There is a dynamic day and night cycle, but it seems to be mainly just visual. I'm not sure how it affects the actual game, because everything is visible wherever you look. I suppose in some areas where there's a bit of shadow, maybe it might be a bit more difficult to see enemies, but it doesn't seem to affect the gameplay all that much. But it's still a nice touch nonetheless. I mean, I'm not complaining. It's good to sort of have that. It adds a bit of life into the environment as well that would otherwise not be there, I guess. Also, I like that even though you spawn with one grenade, getting another grenade is a matter of either picking it up off the ground or buying one from the armory, because otherwise the game might actually end up being a nade spam fest, really. And it does require a decent amount of skill to aim them. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit about, well, I just died there. I was trying to pick up a machine gun just to kind of show how those work, because there is a slight difference. Now, machine guns are quite devastating. They are stabilized by cover. That's one thing. So if you take cover behind something, you can actually get a more accurate fire. But you aren't able to fire it in a standing position. You do actually need to prone. It does follow actual game mechanics. Oh, there's a beer can there. I'll pick that up just to kind of explain what that's all about. Oh, can't get back up. Okay, so you might have noticed I picked up a bunch of items that are... I don't have them anymore. That are highlighted in a cyan or blue text. That is an RP item, so you can actually just sell that to the armory to get more RP. In addition, you can actually cash that stuff in, or rather you can cash the RP into actual cash, and that's a means of actually saving your RP for later. By just exchanging it for cash and then exchanging it back later. It's quite a useful feature indeed. That was a rocket taking out that jeep there. So there is a lot of I suppose the gameplay itself could be considered fluid in the sense that everything is dynamic. The way the campaign plays out, the way you level up. I mean, the RPG elements are not exactly what I would call in-depth. You know, there's no real skill tree or anything to go for. It's mainly level up to unlock different types of weapons, and that can actually affect the way the game plays. But it does suffer from a similar problem that PlanetSide 2 has, or basically any game where you are just a ground trooper. You're not anybody special. In that, no matter how well equipped you are still 1 out of 100 soldiers, and you're not going to turn the tide of a battle all by yourself. So this can lead to very long and drawn-out battles, and for some people that can be considered quite frustrating. I know in one particular instance I was actually playing with a friend, and we were stuck in a particular objective, just completely pinned down there for a better part of half an hour, simply because we couldn't get a decent enough breakout. And that's mainly because both sides were at a stalemate. We had the same amount of troops, we had the same amount of same level of equipment, so we didn't have any armor or anything to speak of, so we were all kind of stuck in that position. That guy's actually a sniper. I'm trying to dodge his fire here. So let's pick that up. I believe that's a shotgun. Yes, it is. Seemingly effective, though. But we are going to run out of ammo at some point. And of course, reloading shotguns requires multiple presses of the reload button. Oh, that's right, yes, so the game has infinite ammo, so long as you have the weapon equipped, you're more or less safe from... Oh, I just got stabbed. You're more or less safe from getting sieged completely, because you just don't run out of ammo. Which kind of contributes to that stalemate problem, actually. But I suppose the other option would be to not have infinite ammo and then be stuck without anything to do, because you do fire a lot. This is, after all, a top-down shooter, and tactical shooting sometimes isn't the main focus. So APC just saved me there. And of course, you are able to deploy cover and barricades and so on, which can help in certain situations as well. So there's a lot of depth to the actual gameplay, even though it's on the surface of it seems fairly simplistic. But one thing that I will say about it, though, is that it has character. It's, for what it is, and most top-down shooters do seem very simplistic when you first play them, until you learn about all the different dynamics involved. And this is really no exception. It does the whole open war thing really, really well, in that there's just so many troops in one battle that it really does feel like an actual war scenario. And the fact that all the factions seem to be based on real-world armies, but armies from a particular era, that you don't end up with all that modern warfare high-tech gadgetry and all that. It's all a matter of M16s and AK-47s, really. So the brown belts that we're fighting right now, of course, are the Russians, and the Americans are more or less like the GIs that from the Vietnam War era sort of thing, even though they're using M16A4s. So, on one hand, it seems to be set in a particular era, but historical accuracy, I think, is probably not the main focus. And of course, with battles this large, having factions coded in a particular color that's easily recognizable is definitely very useful to distinguish friend from foe. So, overall, is it any good? Well, I'm having a lot of fun with it, but I can say that the top-down shooter sort of game is definitely not for everybody. It is a very specific genre. The RPG elements, even though it is touted as a very big feature of the game, are really just a means of progression to unlock different weapons and such. And it doesn't seem to be all that in-depth when you look at it. And of course you can just up the modifiers so you unlock everything very, very fast. Since after all you do have the ability to just increase your experience modifier to the point where everything just gives you a buttload of XP. So unlocking stuff may not be an issue in the end. But gameplay wise, it's definitely, don't take it on the surface. There's a lot more to it than it looks. As far as top-down shooter goes, it does play very much like an all-out war, and there's all sorts of things like vehicles and even artillery strikes that you can call in. So yeah, there's a lot of strategic options as well, given that the game does have an element of tactical play to it. So overall, it's a simple, but deceptively simple package, really, for this game. And one that has a decent amount of character to it, and one that's going to kill you very, very often. But if you can just sort of wrap your head around the fact that you're not a super soldier of any kind, dying so often then doesn't seem like such a big deal. And in the end, it becomes quite an enjoyable game once you get past that. At least for me, anyway. Now, just before I go, I do want to talk about the online mode. Now, there is definitely multiplayer online, and you can, of course, play online co-op as well. However, there are a couple of issues. There are server lists for dedicated servers, and there are a decent amount of them for the different game modes, as you can see here. So there are a few different game modes. However, if you want to join friends, it can be a little bit tricky, mainly because, as I found out anyway, Steam connectivity is non-existent. So trying to join a friend through Steam or Steam Friends List doesn't work. The only way you can really do it is either by joining a public server together, or by manually entering the IP. And this can present one of two problems. Of course, as you can see here, this is not my IP address, this is in fact the IP address of my router. This is a local IP address. So figuring out this part can be a little bit tricky for some people, especially if you're not that tech savvy. So if you're not a tech savvy person, this can be a problem. You can use any port for the game, and it only does use one port, so that is pretty easy to figure out. But entering an IP address can produce some problems, especially if you want to play with a private group. Sharing an IP address can have some security issues, as well as being a little bit tedious as well for a lot of people. So this is a bit of a problem. I would have liked to see just easy join options using Steam Friends and so on, because that would be much easier. But apparently that is not a thing. However, there are some positive points. For one, if you are playing a single player campaign, you do not lose your progress. You can continue using the same save file, and anybody that joins you will have their progress saved on that save file as well. So on that same campaign, you can rejoin and still have your rank and any unlocks that you had before. In addition, if you are playing solo, you can simply switch this single player campaign, just as what we were playing earlier, to an online mode simply by opening the menu and setting it to online. And that's all that you really need to do with it. You don't need to start it as a server. You can just switch it from online to offline with the click of a button. And you don't lose any progress by doing so. So there are some good points, but having this manual IP option being the only thing to set up private groups with is a little bit annoying. So bear that in mind. If you only want to play with a select group of friends, make sure that you know how to use this. It isn't really difficult to figure out, but it is the only option that you have as of now. So bear that in mind. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Panzer taking a look at Running with Rifles. It's now available on Steam for $15 or your regional equivalent. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.